Hey, everybody. Welcome to our live stream here inside Circa. Matthew Coller and Brian Murphy. We're doing Las Vegas for a couple of
In a
days
ballroom.
here in a ballroom.
Air conditioned.
And yeah, luckily, because it's 102 degrees outside, but we're here. And the reason we're here is every year I come out here to Circa because they have their Million and Survivor contest going on. And let me tell you about both as we get going here in the show. And then we're just going to talk football. We've got lots of over-unders and playoff odds to talk about, which may be a little bit interesting for Vikings fans to discuss. But let me tell you,
A lot of money to be made.
That could be true. That might be true. So the Circa Million, you pick 5 teams against the spread each week, and the winner takes home $1 million. And the Survivor contest, that's where you pick a team straight up to win each week. And if you go 20-0 or you're the last person standing, then you bring home huge prize money. Last year, 4 winners split $9.2 million, which is $2.3 million each. It costs $1,000 to enter, and you have to do it in Las Vegas. So we're out here, or Henderson or Reno, but in Nevada, you have to come out here. So if you're stopping on a flight to LA somewhere, you're trying to set up where should I go on a little summer vacation? Of course, 97 degrees out here. But we're at Stadium Swim. We're going to go check out later, which is pools in front of a giant TV screen out there. I tweeted a picture if you want to see what that looks like. But if you got a chance to stop out here, make sure that you come to Circa, sign up for the Million and Survivor contests, and more information at circalasvegas.com. So that's why we are here.
It's a sports fan's delight out here.
It's great. And we were talking with our not Uber driver, our private personal driver that Circa sent us. So they really roll out the red carpet for us here. But we were talking with him about how it's become a great sports town. And that's one of the cool things about coming out now. I went to an Aces game, not last night when the Lynx beat them, but I went to an Aces game last year. And the hockey games you've been to,
I've been to a
here
couple,
in Vegas, the football game last year, I would rather not talk about what that game looks like.
3-0.
But it was a fun experience, I suppose.
The Vikings didn't beat the Raiders; they euthanized them.
That's great. Way to start. The Sphere, I don't know if we're going to have a chance. We're only here for 2 days.
I don't know who's in residence.
We're going to be doing a lot of, I looked it up. You can go in and they have a show that they play like every day. So you could sign up to go in and they put a bunch of stuff and they play music. Maybe we'll have to do it tomorrow. We've got some stuff going on and then we're flying back tomorrow. But for now,
30 hours.
We're going to be hanging out with you guys, just talking football, talking over-unders here that Circa has given us, what their win totals are, which I think are very interesting. We've also made out some bold predictions because this is the time of year, Murph, where the hay is in the barn. I know there's another preseason game. Do you want to hear me preview Jaren Hall's start? Some of you probably do. Maybe it makes a difference between whether he gets the 53 or not, but I kind of doubt it. I think that they've already decided on their 53. Maybe one guy makes the practice squad if he has a good game. The point is,
we'll always have Atlanta.
We could kick back. We could kick back our feet a little bit here and just talk ball. So that's what I want to do.
Everybody's
today and tomorrow. Right, exactly. Today and tomorrow's live stream. So taking your questions, comments, anything that's on your mind about the Vikings, throw it in the chat. We'll be happy to answer it. But let's start out with this. I was looking through. All right, win totals. Going through our San Francisco 11.5. All right, moving around. Patriots 4.5. Okay, no one thinks the Patriots will be good. Where's the Vikings? 6.5. That is where that they have settled here with Circa on the Minnesota Vikings is 6.5 wins. Murph, do you think that that is too low? Are they being disrespected? Even some might say.
I don't think they're being disrespected. They're going to have to earn their respect with the gambling degenerates who seem to know more than all of us combined. I would say I think it's fair. I think it's a fair assessment because they haven't torn it down, but they have rearranged a lot of furniture. And I feel like this is it's kind of a level setting year in the corporate speak. It's also an opportunity to pivot into a new era. Now we know we're not going to see JJ McCarthy this year. Obviously, it wasn't going to be, he might have gotten in early in the season or mid-season, but at that point, it's probably a lost season, and it may have helped for his long-term growth. It could have exposed him to some serious injury as well. So The fact that he's not in play anymore, I don't know. The Vikings are in prove it mode because it's like, who are you guys now? You got Sam Darnold. Is he going to last 17 games? Is he going to shed sort of the issues that he's had, but also the lack of confidence that the coaching staffs in his previous stops have had in him? I feel like this is an opportunity. I think because expectations are fairly low outside of the Twin Cities, the Vikings have an opportunity here to right themselves and maybe not measure themselves by their win-loss record at the end of the season, because I don't, if you're thinking they are a playoff team, then you're obviously looking through some rose-colored glasses. That's not saying it won't happen, but you shouldn't be disappointed if they don't make it.
Well, I want to talk about all the things that it would mean if they were to go over and under with you. But just my thought on this is that as far as the roster goes, from top to bottom, you start with the offensive side and Jefferson, Addison, Hockenson will come back, the offensive line, Aaron Jones, all that, and the coach that they have. That's where your success is mostly driven in the NFL, still on the offensive side. That looks better than a team that should finish with 6 wins to me. Just on those, not Sam Darnold, but everything else, that's a group that should be successful, right? And on the defensive side, they have restocked the cupboard with multiple free agents that were day one free agents that signed what seems like 7 years ago. But having watched Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, I mean, these guys are very good. Blake Cashman, very good. Brian Flores has created this defense in his own vision, and he is one of the best defensive coordinators in the entire NFL. So I look at that and I go, well, that should be pretty competitive. And I'm not saying that either side of the ball is Super Bowl ready. Probably the interior of the offensive line has to be better. Maybe I don't know where Aaron Jones stands. On the defensive side, the interior has to be better. The cornerbacks have to be more reliable, and the depth has to be a little better. In order for you to say, hey, this is a true Super Bowl team, they probably need 1 or 2 more top-end type of players too. All right, that's fine. But that should get you into a middling type of record. That should put you in the 8 to 10 win type of thing. It really rests entirely on Sam Darnold for why this says 6.5 wins, because nothing about the coaching staff, nothing about the rest of the roster, even heck, the kicker has been unbelievable in training camp. It really has. Will Reichert. Everything about this team says this should be a team that competes for the playoffs. But I think it's just the lack of trust for Darnold. And it's also respect to the division, because if we go through the Detroit Lions, 10.5, Green Bay Packers, 9.5. Where's Chicago? What is Chicago at? Chicago is at 8.5. That's actually surprising to me. That feels a little high on Chicago.
There's a lot more upside. There's a lot more faith in Caleb Williams. There's a lot more sense that this is a team that had a great offseason, that added to its roster and has a lot of upside. The Vikings are a team in transition, and I feel like there's a sense out there, as you mentioned. I'd love to see what the line was 2 weeks ago when McCarthy was still on the active roster. Maybe it might have been ticked up at least to 7.5 or so. This is a team, though, that is, as you mentioned, solid coaching. Its depth has improved, but it also feels like a team that may not be able to be as high-powered offensively as they could have been with Cousins again. And I know that's going to rankle you. Cousins was going to deliver his numbers. It almost seems like this is a team that's been built, I don't want to say in the Mike Zimmer image, but more in the, are they going to grind out 1,000 yards from Aaron Jones, keep Sam Darnold out of trouble, and hope the defense comes up with a turnover or two, and you start winning 16 to 13 games. I don't know if there's a place for that in the modern NFL, but there might be a place for that for the Vikings to remain competitive this year, unless Darnold does exceed expectations.
Yeah, I think that you can still be a team that is in the playoffs and is competitive, and on a week-to-week basis, you could beat just about anybody in the league. That doesn't mean you're beating them week after week after week, but when you play against the Houston Texans, you feel like they're a better team, but it's not like they are a vastly, wildly better team than you. And when you go against Green Bay and the division, you think you should split the division. It just, when you have a roster that is built with a lot of veteran players who are proven, I think that all of those players, it should be considered that they're more predictable than teams that rely on a lot of young players, just for example. So you know what Jonathan Grenard's going to give you. You know what Stephon Gilmore is going to give you. Players like that who have been around for a little while. There's almost nobody who's brand new that they're really relying upon. And even the head coach is not a brand new thing. We know that the head coach can have Nick Mullins play quarterback and throw for 400 yards against the Detroit Lions. And we know that Brian Flores is one of the best defensive coordinators in the league. And I think that in itself can enhance the performance of one player, the quarterback. And the defense is part of this too, getting turnovers, getting stops, giving more opportunities to Sam Darnold, putting less pressure on Sam Darnold. I think he played with a few teams that had very meh defenses that maybe he felt like a lot of times he had to make the hero throw that he might not have to make here. I'm trying to make the case a little bit that it feels low, that I think even one more win feels different to me if you said 7.5. Okay, because teams with this much talent usually don't lose that many games, usually don't lose 2 out of every 3 games. I mean, even look at, am I wrong? Didn't the New York Giants win 6 games last year? I mean, the Giants had nothing. They had nothing last year. It was either 6 or 5. I'm going to pull it up. What did the Giants do last year? Does my phone even have this? Maybe I'm looking in the wrong spot. Now it's showing preseason record. That's exactly what I needed, was their preseason record. It was 5 or 6 that they won last year.
We can have our producer look this up.
Yes, our he's over here. Well, Jonathan is at home. But yeah, my point just being that usually you have to be really atrocious. Usually you don't have this much talent. Usually you have a bad coach. Usually it's not just, oh, they don't have a great quarterback, for the reason that you get something this low for an over-under number. And when you look at Tampa Bay with Mayfield, or you look at Seattle with Geno Smith, a lot of times average, middling, with an average quarterback and a decent roster is the expectation, I think. So I look at it much more as Romaine there says 8-9 this year. I look at much more 8 or 9 wins for this team based on what they have on the rest of the group. I just feel like there is, and I know quarterback is the driving force, but so much focus on one guy's impact on this number that we're forgetting about a lot of other parts of this team that are good.
And we should learn everything we need to know by the end of October too, right? Because the first half of the schedule is pretty brutal. I mean, you've got San Francisco, you've got the Rams, you've got Houston, not to mention the NFC North, which used to be a one-team dominated division, whether it was the Vikings or the Packers trading off or battling each other for a division title. Right now, you've got the Lions that are, among the top Super Bowl favorites. The Packers have arrived, I think, a lot quicker than maybe people thought they would after manhandling Dallas in the playoffs last year. Now Jordan Love gets his money. The Bears had a heck of an offseason. Besides drafting Williams, they obviously spent a lot of money to shore up what they needed to shore up, and they seem to be a team on the rise too. So I don't necessarily think it's the Vikings roster that's underwhelming, that's got people, Vegas, thinking they're going to be 6.5. I think it's the fact that they've got a buzzsaw of a division and a buzzsaw of a first half schedule that's going to really put them under the microscope early, and that this could easily get away from them at 3-6. So all of that momentum and all of that possibility, if you lose that early on, it sets up a very long second half of the season.
Well, and something that maybe I wouldn't bake in as much as maybe they would is the chances that Sam Darnold even could get hurt. He's gotten hurt before, and he does
and then
take
the carousel begins
a lot of sacks, right? And if he were to get banged up at all, then you'd be talking Nick Mullins. I will be actually curious to see if they do any looking around for other quarterbacks who get cut. If there's another veteran that they consider, maybe Matt Corral is going to be amazing in the preseason game number 3, and they'll keep him and it become the next great backup quarterback. Probably not though, right?
Maybe Tom Brady gets bored in the booth.
Yeah.
Greg Olson says, "This is mine. I want to come back." And Tom says, I wouldn't mind throwing to Justin Jefferson.
I believe that they called Tom Brady last year. I don't know this for sure, but I think when Kirk got hurt, they called Tom and said, "Are you sure? Are you sure? Do you want to come back?" So you never know, I guess. I haven't heard him in the booth yet. I don't know if he's going to be good at that. My point is that I understand where they're coming from. when you have a quarterback who has a history of not being that great. But even when he was in Carolina, he went 8-9 in his 17 starts. And you're saying with this team that's much better and much better coached, but to your point, the schedule is baked in, the chance he gets hurt baked in, the backup quarterback you have is baked in, and probably the depth as well, where Jordan Addison got banged up. And now, as much as Jalen Naylor has had a great training camp, and look, I think Addison will be back early in the season, but Naylor has like 9 career catches. And this is the guy who is—
a lot of them were big.
Right. But this is the guy who's going in if Jordan Addison can't play week 1. And then the next man up after that is Brandon Powell, who was a punt returner until last year. That's kind of the story of a lot of positions on this team, where at defensive tackle, I think they've been better than I expected, but one layer down is you're playing a 7th rounder and having to start him. And one layer down at cornerback, if Stephon Gilmore were to get banged up, or if Byron Murphy were to get banged up, is we're doing the Caleb Evans thing again. And I'm sure that that's part of the thought process. I just wondered if, when Vikings fans heard this, and I'm curious from the comment section, if you hear 6.5 and you're thinking, no way, 6.5, what? Or if you go, yeah, it's okay. And I think that so far the early returns are most people going, yeah, that could happen. Everybody waiting around till 2025. But let's talk about what happens if they win more or less than this. If they win 6 games or less, what does that look like?
Looks like a major indictment on Sam Darnold. It looks like a major indictment on the the misfortune of having McCarthy tear his meniscus in his one shining preseason moment. It will be interesting because obviously the brass is going into a contract year next year. I can't see the Wilfs unless, if it's a 5 or 6 win season that looks like a 3-win season, and the locker room splinters and you have off-field issues. I don't see any of that happening. If that happens, though, then I think you've got some serious questions now about whether this regime, not whether they should come back, but whether they're going to survive. And I want to see how, again, it's not exactly how many games you win or how many games you lose. It's what you look like when you're doing it. And what confidence you're inspiring that the right people are in place to not only make plays and turn things around, but keep things from falling apart, to keep the fissures and fractures and the pressures of losing in the NFL from compounding and basically making it a dead team walking. That's not what you want. Because if you're playing meaningless games in November, we've been there before. We know what that's like.
Oh, yeah. In fact, I don't think that we have actually had a single playoff win since Purple Insider started. That's right. Yeah, because 2020 would have been when it started, and there has not been a playoff win yet. Wow. And I guess
I hadn't thought about it in that
I
context.
had not either. That's actually a little depressing.
I blame you.
I think about, we've got a good number of people watching right now, and the people who have followed along with Purple Insider through 0 playoff wins since I even started. So much respect to all of you. But I agree with you that there is almost a line in the sand here, exactly where Circa in their win total is drawing it, which would be at 6 wins. Because if you end up with 7, 8, 9, okay, I think that everyone could understand Sam Darnold is who he is. We're waiting around for JJ McCarthy. 7 wins means some guys had great seasons and some guys didn't. We've seen great seasons from Justin Jefferson where they win 7 games, or even last year, a half a season where he still gets 1,000 yards and comes out saying, all right, I'm still the best receiver in the league. A lot of Jonathan Grenard could have 12 sacks in a 7-win season. I mean, I think that's part of it to me, is when you go over that, it means that a lot of the things that you made bets on worked out. So you extended Jefferson, which we knew they were going to do, and that's a long-term move, but you sign Van Ginkel, you sign Cashman, you sign Grenard, you spend some money on this team. Certain guys you're hoping develop, like Ivan Pace, and take another step, and things like that. Jalen Naylor, take another step. So you can kind of look at that and go, well, all right, that means a lot of things went well, and a lot of things bode well for the next season, even if we're not there yet. That's if you get to 8 wins or 9 wins. If you go 6, that means a lot of people did not play up to their expectation.
And the wrong bets were made.
And the wrong bets were made. And it also means that there is going to be a lot more questioning of the head coach. I mean, I just think that is inherent to what it is and to be in the NFL, that you will not have a 6-win season and have everybody go, you know what, Kevin O'Connell's great.
He's not a unicorn.
Right.
So no, losing, every head coach wears losing like an albatross. It's not, O'Connell's no exception. Again, is he in control? Does he feel like he's in control? Does he start lashing out? I don't see that in his makeup, but you saw what happened when Mike Zimmer realized he was playing with a losing hand. It went south fast. I don't see Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi not speaking to each other for 3 months. I don't see the leadership of this team caving in and basically sabotaging almost and running a coach out of town. Those are the things that are cataclysmic that can happen during a season. It's not how much. It's not all the losses. It's how you're looking and managing the losses too. Because a lot about being a successful coach, even on the best teams that may only lose 3 or 4 games a year, how are you managing those losses? How are you responding Monday morning? How are you responding practice Wednesday and Thursday? How are you responding in your next game? Does it snowball? Are you able to stop it? Are you able to maintain that confidence level in the locker room with the fan base? Every indication is everybody's all in on O'Connell, but you're right. 6-11, that can change a lot of minds.
Well, and a big part of the sign Sam Darnold, move on from Kirk Cousins thing was that Kevin O'Connell can whisper in the ear of quarterback and make him a better version than he's ever been. If Sam Darnold doesn't play well and they win 6 games, because that's what it really comes down to. If he plays well, then they have enough talent everywhere else for them to win more than 6 games. So if he doesn't play well, if he throws a lot of picks, takes a lot of sacks, struggles, has a couple of exciting games, but mostly isn't good, and they win 6, does it erode away at all at the idea that Kevin O'Connell is the quarterback whisperer that they hired to help Kirk Cousins become the best version of himself, which the results were mixed, I think, as they always were with Cousins. His best statistical year was 2019. He was older. Maybe the team wasn't quite as good as it was. I thought that Kirk, though, got along really well with O'Connell, and that having a veteran quarterback who could handle a lot of things was at the benefit of O'Connell. But now he has a quarterback with some very serious flaws in Darnold, and in the future, he's going to have a young quarterback with McCarthy. I don't think, for me, that there will be a huge connection between the two, because I think McCarthy is just better. I think he was probably better already. And if he had started week 1, it would have been fine. We know what Sam Darnold is for the most part. But I think for a lot of fans, that will have that effect. If Darnold throws 15 touchdowns and 18 picks and they go 6-11, I do think a lot of fans will go, isn't this supposed to be the coach that makes all the quarterbacks better? I don't think of it necessarily that way because of the huge history and all the offensive coaches who have tried with Sam Darnold. But I do think that thought will creep into a lot of fans and maybe even the people who own the team.
And rightfully so. And if you're right, if he's 10 of 28 for 170 yards with 3 picks in a bad looking loss over and over again, you can't go to the bailout and say it was bad protection. Is he getting the ball to Jefferson? Is Jefferson starting to lose it a little bit? Jefferson's had a cool head most of the time. Now he's got his money. He's got ultimate leverage in that locker room. He's obviously the alpha male. If he's not getting the ball enough, if he's getting passes behind him, if he's getting blown up in the middle of the field because Darnold's leading him into a safety, how is that going to affect him? How is that relationship going to maintain? And is it going to be O'Connell putting out fires all season long, or is it going to be O'Connell making adjustments and like he did last year with the quarterback carousel, designing game plans on the fly for the arms that he had? If Darnold turns out to be, the dead quarterback walking that a lot of people think he might be, how is O'Connell going to respond to that? Is he going to be able to at least patch some things together to get through the season? Or you're right, he's going to have questions to answer because this is his wheelhouse. And if he hasn't been able to produce a playoff win with the numbers that he had with Cousins and a reclamation project like Darnold, He doesn't have McCarthy to bail him out.
Yeah, I just feel like last year there was a contingent. I would not say it was a huge one, but a contingent of fans that when they didn't adjust to Josh Dobbs' skill set were very critical of Kevin O'Connell. And I didn't really want to go there because it's Josh Dobbs. What number team is he on now? I saw him scrambling around for San Francisco. It's got to be like 8 different teams.
What can you do in 3 days?
Well, and even beyond then, I think the criticism was, and there's merit to this, trying to get Josh Dobbs to understand the full offense within that season to where he could run it with rhythm and timing and things like that. It just wasn't really possible. He wasn't good enough. And even when Carson Palmer joined the team at midseason, he wasn't very good at doing that. It's a really hard thing to do.
Joe Flacco did it.
Yeah, I get. I mean, right, yeah. But even were Joe Flacco's numbers even good for Cleveland, or do they have the best defense in the league? And it can be done. I don't think it's totally impossible, but for someone who's never been good before ever, it may have been a lot to ask. Should you have pared that down? Could you have won one of those games if you pared it down a little bit for Josh Dobbs, because he could make some plays on his own? But I never thought that meant anything to the future. This is a little bit different because Arnold is more talented. He's been a starter throughout his entire career. He's more talented by 50 miles.
And scar tissue adds some value.
And he really created a narrative like O'Connell did by coming out and saying, we believe in Sam Darnold as a guy who could take another step and all those things. And he's had a full mini camp. He's had his full offense implemented and downloaded into Sam Darnold's brain.
And he doesn't have McCarthy breathing down his neck anymore.
There's no pressure on Sam Darnold from that perspective. And so now it's really, can you get the most out of this guy? And the best career season out of Sam Darnold might not be good enough for the playoffs, but I think it's good enough for 8 wins, at least to get him there. So I think that it would be rational to look at it and say, man, if he couldn't get even a little bit more out of Darnold, what's going on there? But I also don't want to totally connect that to JJ McCarthy, who looked great in learning his offense. So I think it's a complicated question of how much you would put a 6-win season where Darnold isn't good onto the shoulders of the head coach. Jake says, on the contrary, it would be a big success to overachieve, or would it be a big success to overachieve and win 8 or 9 games? What do you think of that? If they were to win 8 because their over-under is 6.5, should we look at that and go, it's a pretty good job, or not? Or is 8 just not that good?
8's not great, but 8 is kind of where I see this team landing anyway. So I don't view it as a lost season. Did Darnold do enough to be respectable? Did he get the ball to Justin Jefferson? Were they able to exploit and utilize his talents? Did the defense win you a couple of games or put you in a position to win a couple of games? Again, it's all about optics, right? I mean, 8 wins can feel like a lost season, but 8 wins where you had a coach and a defensive coordinator kind of magic with what they have. If you're able to coax a 8-win season out of Sam Darnold through health, and by the way, the carousel last year didn't have Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones could change the dynamic and take a lot of heat off of Darnold, because obviously the Vikings haven't had much of a running game since Dalvin Cook was healthy. So if it is going to be a little bit more of a ground and pound and then rely on your defense more, I mean, Darnold might be able to get away with 8 wins. And I think you can look at that. If you're not able to get a look at McCarthy through the season, which we know they're not, this is a transition season. I think everybody expects this to be a transition season. I don't view 8 wins as a lost season. I look at it as an opportunity maybe to evaluate, did you accomplish some of the things the changes you made, the personnel you have? Are the younger players growing? Are they developing? Is Jefferson happy? And were you competitive against some of these tough playoff teams? Were you putting on a show? I mean, as much as 2022 was a miracle season in so many ways, it was a lot of flash, and we knew there wasn't a lot of substance there, as enjoyable as it was. There may not be a lot of flash in an 8-win season, but there could be some substance there that you could build on going forward.
Well, and you and I earlier were recording an interview with Colton Pouncey, who covers the Lions, and he talked about that one season in 2022 where the Lions started out 1-6.
Right.
They turned things around at the end of the season. Even though they didn't make the playoffs, everyone felt like this is going in the right direction. I think that I've probably said this before about training camps through the years. Vibes matter. The vibes of a season, I think, was what you're alluding to, is how it looks matters as much as the win total. Does it look like the guys who are going to be here long term are driving some success, even if it's not winning every single game? And even if they do have a double-digit loss, which didn't happen too often under Kirk, or a double-digit win, but does it feel like the key guys for the future, which is not Darnold, but it's a lot of players on defense that will be here year over year? It's the receivers. It's maybe Ty Chandler. It's the offensive line. Like, does that look like it's going in the right direction? And do you survive as a head coach when you hit the bumpy road? Because there will be a lot more bumps along the road, I think, as we have a quarterback that doesn't even things out, like Cousins, who after every horrible game always seem to come back with a great game. But there's no guarantee in Darnold's history that he's going to be that guy, that he's going to be able to bounce back when he has bad games. Al says Matthew is much more optimistic about Sam Darnold than the odds makers. Well, I think the odds makers are logical in focusing a lot of their win-loss on the quarterback. I mean, if you just go through here, almost all of it, you could just look at the number and go, oh, yeah, the Chiefs, 11.5, which will probably go over. I wonder who their quarterback is.
Superstar.
The Cowboys, Eagles, right? It's all guys who could win MVPs or compete for MVPs that are going to be at the highest. So I understand why they're doing it. Part of it is that I've seen it in training camp actually work with Sam Darnold and Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, and he hasn't even had T.J. Hawkinson. That is certainly part of why I think they could go over this. I also look up and down the league, and how many teams that have solidified pretty solid coaches will find a way to get to 8. I mean, this was even Mike Zimmer most of the time found a way to get 7, even if it was a bad season, 7, 8 wins. The 2020 season is a nightmare. It still wins 7 games. And I think the same thing for somebody like Pittsburgh Steelers, who've had bad quarterback play, and Mike Tomlin has grinded them through. Seattle hasn't been all that special the last few years. Pete Carroll was able to push them into contention. Right, exactly. I don't think it's unfair, even despite the uncertainty of quarterback, to expect that if this is a good coaching staff, as we think it is, to be over 6.
Well, it's easy, too, to forget. You mentioned bumps in the road. There are going to be some. There's going to be many this season, obviously. Think of the last 6 weeks O'Connell's had to manage. I mean, clearly you lose one of your draft picks tragically to a car accident, 10 days before training camp starts. You lose your first-round draft pick to a season-ending injury. I think they've signed at least 4 or 5 cornerbacks since training camp began. You're constantly in flux there. You almost, looks like Addison, short-term, long-term prognosis still up in the air. We haven't had anything definitive out of Cleveland yet.
I don't think it's going to be too bad.
But it's still another, it's another chink. And it's another, it's a hard thing to overcome when you haven't even played a game yet.
Yep.
And you talk about training camp vibes. It doesn't seem like there's a woe is us, doom and gloom, what could happen next. Maybe among the fan base,
right,
but not so much the locker room.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. The vibes have not been good only because of the number of things that have happened, that it's tough to come to a training camp after one of your teammates dies for the season. It's tough to deal with the distraction of a player getting arrested. It's tough to deal with your quarterback going down and all that. But I think that overall, they actually have been healthy as a complete roster through training camp. And it feels like the vibe of the defense specifically is one that is ever growing in confidence. And I was trying to get this out of O'Connell and Flores by asking them about it last week. Neither one would really bite on this. Maybe they didn't want to disrespect the Browns, but to my eye, the defense came together in Cleveland. That was where playing against another team and dominating that other team, there was a different confidence coming out of that. Like, yeah, we can do this week. We can be a defense that nobody really wants to play against because they do have so much talent there. And then with getting Stephon Gilmore, that's sort of a final piece if he plays well, which makes me think that if you can get past everything that you've dealt with throughout this training camp and still come out of it with one side of the ball feeling great about themselves, the other side at least saw Darnold in a game setting play really well and in numerous practices play pretty well, that they can have confidence they can compete. That's like a win in itself to get to this point because we know how hard it's going to be. when the season finally starts. Let's see. Romaine says less than 7 wins would be a disaster with this offense and Flores' defense, even with an average QB. The thing about Sam Darnold is he has not been an average QB.
Yeah, he's not.
He has been a horrific
Average would be
QB.
fine.
It's really just the facts. I looked this up, and I don't have the exact stat, but quarterbacks that started, I think, 50 games or more over the last 20 years, he's like bottom 5 in quarterback rating. He's down there with all the busts, and he's really the only one that's still given a chance, and I think that's part of because of what he went through in Carolina and New York.
And the demand for quarterback.
But it's not average. If it was average, this team would win 9 games with the rest of their talent.
Wouldn't it be ironic if the defense is the one that's going to turn this? All the talk about quarterback and McCarthy and Darnold, giving Jefferson his money, and the health of the offensive line and how sturdy it is, the acquisition of Aaron Jones. It may be the defense that dictates everything with this club.
I think so too, because this defense is the first one since 2019 that I thought to myself, they can win a game for you. And last year, a little bit, they won the game out here in Vegas. What a game it was.
3-0.
3-0. Yep, soccer score in that one. But they can now, I think, the talent they have, actually win a game, actually cause a opposing quarterback to be lost out there. They can pick the ball off. They can get more sacks, I think, than last year. It's just a deeper defense and has had players develop and has added a lot of talent to the point where, I mean, if you said in the offseason they were going to add Grenard, Van Ginkel, Cashman, Gilmore, like that's a lot. That's a lot of very proven players.
And all anybody wants to talk about is they lost Danielle Hunter.
Right. I think has been made up for with more versatility. Oh, yeah, and by the way, drafted Dallas Turner, which would be most teams' top 10 draft pick coming out. And instead, they end up landing him because it was just a strange year. There's been so much added to this defense that I think what you're throwing out there is realistic when we talk about the over-under. Why can't this defense get them to at least 7? 7 is not a whole lot to ask in the NFL. So I think the expectation has to be higher than that. Let's see. Oh, and the point about, the 7 wins would be less than 7 wins would be a disaster. I mostly agree, even though I think that the quarterback's history has been way less than average. Todd says KOC is overrated. No success without Kirk, and even then, Captain Checkdown was only very slightly improved. Well, I think his success without Kirk was not to be evaluated with Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs, but maybe Matthew Stafford, where he was the offensive coordinator when they won the Super Bowl. I mean, to say no success, you have to include the reason he got hired here, which was winning a Super Bowl in large part because of the quarterback performing better than he ever had before. And with Kirk Cousins, it's interesting to look at Cousins because if you just look at something like quarterback rating, it doesn't tell the story of Cousins under KOC because the volume went up. And when volume goes up, efficiency goes down. This goes for anything. If you shoot only wide open threes in basketball, you'll make a higher percentage than if you shoot them off the dribble. But Anthony Edwards shooting off the dribble is way more valuable because you could do it any place, anytime. So Kirk, I think, was more valuable under KOC. They went 17-9 together, which I don't think he'd ever done before. The offense, I looked this up. It was top 10 from the time he took over to the day Kirk got hurt. And even when Nick Mullins was in there, he played pretty well. So I don't know. I think that's really an unfair characterization of KOC and Cousins. We saw him beat San Francisco. We saw him beat Green Bay. Those were big games that Cousins didn't used to win. The confidence Cousins led with the team, there was a lot different. I think you have to ignore a lot of information to say that nothing was different. And also he had Kevin Stefanski too, who's been a pretty good quarterback. Do you have a comment on that?
Well, I was just going to say, I think Cousins was peaking on October 29th when it all ended badly at Lambeau.
Yeah.
And that relationship will always be sort of a what might have been because they weren't able to bring last season into fruition, and it became the carousel.
Let's see, Benjamin, and feel free to keep throwing your questions in there. We're just hanging out here for a while. We've got plans to eat some steak later, and that's really it. So I
might throw a chip on a table.
We're just
call me crazy.
Well, I don't know. I mean, win in Vegas, I suppose. But just a reminder, the reason that we're here, we started out the show telling you about it, but the Circa Million and Survivor contest every year a huge deal. It's a massive contest that they have. They have numbers up here for how much is currently in play as far as dollar figures. For the million contest, it's 3.4 right now. And for the Survivor contest, it's 4.2. That's $1 million that
With an
are
M.
at stake. Yes. And Circa LasVegas.com is a good place to find out more. If you want to get in on this, you have to come out to Vegas. So if you have a flight that's headed somewhere, have it stop here, stop into Circa, get involved with the Million and Survivor contest. You know what a Survivor contest? The Million is a pick'em contest. So that's why we're here. Every year, come out and they put us up and show us a good time. So we're thrilled to be here, even if we're sitting uncomfortably close to each other and not on Zoom where we usually are. Anyway, Benjamin asks, how does the JJ injury affect losing or keeping quarterback guru Josh McCown or other staff? I don't know that it impacts it very much. I mean, I think McCown came here to help with the development of JJ McCarthy,
Which he can still do.
which he could still do next year.
We can still do even off the field.
Yes.
I mean, he's going to, McCarthy's not, as you mentioned, he's not a leper. I mean, he's going to be around. He's going to be in the room. He's going to be on the sidelines. He's going to be reviewing tape. He's going to be in the meeting rooms. It's not like he's banished to go rehab. He will be off on his own rehabbing, which will be its own mental grind. But his interaction with his QB coach isn't going to change.
No, I don't think so. And McCown, I don't believe came here as a one-year thing. I think he wanted to come here over multiple years, develop JJ McCarthy, and then maybe move up the ladder.
Yeah.
But one thing I noticed,
JJ McCarthy could make him an offensive coordinator.
it very much could. And when you talked about the inside the building matters as much as the win total, we haven't seen coaches leave. I mean, Chris Rumpf on the defensive side left, and I think reportedly there was an issue with him and Brian Flores, but they were from two different coaching staffs. So aside from that, because Rumpf had stayed around, and I think maybe vision was a little different, but McCardle was here when O'Connell got here, Wes Phillips, Curtis Motkins, Chris Cooper, like all their coaches, except for Brian Flores, are kind of day one guys, and Flores even staying here after last year. They've created a good environment for everyone to work within, and I think McCown probably wants to see that through, and I would too. After what he saw from the way McCarthy was coming around, I think he'd want to see that out.
Well, he can burnish his credentials by helping reclamate Sam Darnold and then shepherding JJ McCarthy through a long career, into a long career. This
is a good question from Romaine. What if Darnold is good? What if Darnold is good?
Lock him up long term. Take the house money and run. I don't. If he's wondering if it's going to set up a controversy with McCarthy next year, I mean, unless we're talking Kurt Warner type success where he's bathing in confetti in February, I'm not sure there's going to be any QB controversy. If anything, it'll rehabilitate Darnold's career for something else.
So I think
go ahead.
Well, I think if Darnold plays well enough to get them into the playoffs, even if the numbers are not spectacular, then all the things we talked about on the other side will be the opposite. So all the things that if he was bad and how we view Kevin O'Connell and their offense, it will all be the other, which would be we would go into 2025 feeling as confident as any team in the league that this coach could make any quarterback good in the same way that Kyle Shanahan has been able to do with numerous quarterbacks over his career.
Purdy,
right. And not every single Kyle Shanahan quarterback was good. I think he coached Johnny Manziel. That didn't work out very well. And he also coached Nick Mullins, and he didn't win a lot of games with Nick Mullins either. But if you take a Sam Darnold and he goes 9-8 and they make a playoff game and he throws for 22 touchdowns, 14 picks, and 4,000 yards, and Justin Jackson never yells at him, then I think that would be an incredible confidence boost. So the way that this team feels long-term, it does get impacted by what happens this year, I think big time, and the amount of pressure on O'Connell. If you win 9 games and Darnold is good, then Mark Wilf is coming back saying, I never said I wasn't going to extend you. I just, what? Here's a 4-year extension, right? Like, things are very different if they're able to win with Sam Darnold.
Yeah, and also, not only is it going to be different, but what will it do? It validates all the offseason bets they've made this offseason if they end up playing well and making the playoffs. And also, we know the vault's going to open next year. They're going to have ton of cap space. Kwesi can be as creative as he wants to be. He can be as aggressive as he wants to be. So you're going to be adding to a team on the upswing. I think it'd be attractive for free agents, and it'd be attractive even for Sam Darnold to say, look, I came here and rescued my career. I may be moving on. But what I experienced in Minnesota isn't just a one-off. This is going to set me up for future success. And anybody else that's considering signing in Minnesota, you want to play for this guy, you want to be in this building. That stuff matters too. So yeah, a 9-win successful season may put Sam Darnold on the fast track out of town either way. But it also sets up higher expectations, and it makes Minnesota an attractive place to not only come to, but it's an attractive opportunity for the front office to really go all in next year.
Right, because if you think about if you're in a free agent's shoes, you're thinking about two things. One is dollar figure, which they're going to have the cap space thanks to Kirk Cousins finally being off the books after next year. So they're going to have the cap space. They're going to think about, how will this work for my family? Is it a good organization? Which the Vikings have checked off a lot of those boxes.
The NFLPA seems to think they're number one, right?
Exactly. And that's the anonymous players anonymously saying what an environment it is for the Vikings, but they've been number 1 and 2 the last 2 years. So they have those boxes checked. But the thing that would keep you away is if you thought, I'm not going to win. Because what everybody knows is if you win, you get paid more. Right? I mean, everybody gets raises when you win and you get more attention and you're at the center of the NFL world. And if you go 9-8 with Sam Darnold, then everyone is going to repeat just what I just said. They went 9-8 with Sam Darnold. It's going to be 7 months leading up to the free agency period. Oh man, if they could go 9-8 with Sam Darnold, imagine what they'll be able to. Yeah, exactly. And that's, I think, attractive for the future. If you go 6-11, it's a little bit harder. Then you got to bump that dollar figure up a little bit more. If you're actually getting anybody here, then it's going to be a little bit harder. And also, if I'm
somebody else making that decision.
Well, and if I'm a player signing a long-term contract, I'm not entirely sure if the coach is going to be there for more than one season. So it does. Sometimes we act like, oh, just sim to 2025, like forget this season, who cares? But it has real implications on what's going to happen in the future. Let's see. Jake says, if our run game is still bad with this backfield, I'm going to have some pretty big concerns about the future. Well, I will definitely wonder if they can't run with these two.
When will they be able to?
Right. That's
the offensive line they have.
The other thing, too, is they didn't make a change of running back coordinator, running back coach, or offensive line coach, which they seem to get along with him. But those guys are usually heavily involved in the run game. I'm willing to be patient on that because it was Alexander Madison. But I agree with you, Jake, that this is a prove it. Can you actually run the football? In camp, it's looked okay, but they're not tackling. So how should I know? But you've got two good enough running backs, and maybe even Kene Nwangwu as well. This is a litmus test for whether you can actually run the ball or if you're just not a coach who knows how to do that.
Or is even interested.
Right. That's another thing. Filt Croft says 10-7 season with way too much talent on both sides of the ball. Darnold just has to be good and consistent. Those are two things he's never been ever. Even at USC, consistent.
Good and consistent would be amazing.
Right. Yeah, that's right. You're right. If he was good and consistent, well, they might even win more than that. It really comes down to that second part, I think. I think he could be good at times, but consistent, I'm not so sure. This is how you know you have consistent and good listeners. Is Gazinkid says, not as ironic as a cell phone company wanting us to use our cell phones less. You know, what he's referring to, Murph, is my ad read. Because what happens is when I do live streams, I get into the conversation and I forget to do the ad read. So I'm going to do that now.
Thanks
so
for
I
the
don't
tip.
forget. This is good listeners, active listeners. And what he's talking about is US Cellular, who noticed that the way we use our cell phones has gotten ironic. We try to put our phones down for dinner, but the menu is on a QR code. That's ironic. We hit the like button on social media posts that we don't actually like. Ironic, which is why US Cellular created Us Mode to help us reconnect with each other and use our phones less ironically. A phone company wanting people to use their phones less. That's ironic. Let's find us again with Us Mode from US Cellular. Visit uscellular.com/built for us to get started. You guys are wonderful. I asked them to do that because I forgot too many times and I didn't want to get in trouble with US Cellular. Now, someone needs to ask me a fantasy question later so we can make sure we get underdog their due as well. Let's see. BS Stuff says, awesome giving props to the defense, but would a stellar defense cause KOC to become too conservative with Darnold at quarterback? Or do you think the KOC would try to keep the foot on the gas to keep the game out of hand?
From getting out of hand or get out?
Or from getting out, or to put the game out of hand. Sorry, I read that wrong. To put the game out of hand. So meaning that is he going to start punting on fourth
Yeah,
downs?
we got 20 points. That's good enough. Put the ball in the hands of our defense.
Do you think that KOC changes his coaching style because of Darnold?
I would hope not. That's not what they hired. Mike Zimmer was that coach. They hired this guy to replace Mike Zimmer instead of taking the ball out of your offensive hands and not having much trust in it and shoving it into your favorite defense's hands and saying, let's go win 13-7. Again, it may be a game-to-game situation if it's a muddy, messy game and Darnold is, 10 for 22. Yeah, he may put the ball in Aaron Jones' hand more and say, we got to work the clock more. I don't think overall philosophically he wants to do that. He may have to make quarter by quarter, game by game decisions based on Darnold's performance. I don't think he's going to hide Darnold unless he has to protect him.
Right.
And that could play out against some of these tougher teams. I wouldn't go into it thinking that he's going to have Darnold on a leash all season long. But there may be times where if they do have to be conservative, is that going to be satisfactory? Will that be understandable, or will that look like they don't trust their quarterback? How is that going to play out?
There are certain things that I've noticed over the years that there will be one play or one game and that will happen, and that really sticks in people's minds. Probably when you got the angriest at your team or when it went the wrongest.
Right. Why didn't you go for it? Why did you punt?
Right. And I know exactly where this question is rooted. This question is rooted in punting against Chicago at home last year,
right,
rather than going for it. And what you're saying is what they did last year was Josh Dobbs threw 4 picks, so they punted. I would have punted too because Josh Dobbs threw 4 picks.
And Justin Fields hadn't proven himself to be able to go out and win a game.
And I'm Mr. Go for it all the time. I think that even coaches who have come along haven't even come along far enough. I think you could go for it even more, but I would have punted in that scenario. And you probably will see him do that at times if Darnold is having a rough day, but they're in a close game. The fact that you might have a run game you can rely on may be a good thing to be a little more conservative when it comes to running the ball. If you've got a lead and trying to sit on the lead and trusting the defense. I think Mike Zimmer got ripped on a lot for this, but he also won a lot of games that way. They didn't give away tons of games early in Zimmer's era when they had a great defense. It was really later when he would play conservatively, but they didn't have a good defense. It would drive you crazy. There was an Arizona game that was really nuts that they missed the field goal at the end, 2021, week 2, where they stupidly punted like 3 different times and just completely botched the game management and really lost because of that. And even got conservative, I think, in route to kicking that field goal where they just got to the field goal position. Now we're going to hand off. We're not going to really, push for getting the kicker closer. And then he misses and they blew that one badly. But when Zimmer played that way in 2017 with Case Keenum, let's keep the ball on the ground. Let's run play actions. Let's not go crazy on offense so we can let our defense win the game.
They won 13 games.
They won 13 games. And it may all depend on how strong this defense really is for what your play style ends up being. Let's see. Well, I've got to answer a question from Gazinkad after he reminded me of the ad read. What if everything goes right? Well, that's a good question.
Then we're talking 9.
You think
maybe
9?
10?
That was my question. How
wins?
many wins if everything goes right?
9.5. I want to hedge a little. The question is, does 9 get you in?
Right.
In this division and also this conference? Does 9 wins get you? I mean, we know all the tie-breaking scenarios that are going to play out. But if 9 doesn't get you in, is that considered a success regardless?
I think that 9 and missing the playoffs is pretty successful versus, I mean, when you're outperforming your expectations by 3 games, that's pretty decent, I think. But also,
But everything's going right.
yeah, I mean,
What's
you
the
want
ceiling
you,
if everything
you want
goes
to
right?
right. I guess that's what I was trying to think of. Is like, what are we talking about when we say everything goes right? If Sam Darnold is Randall
average.
Cunningham from 1998,
Well, that's way above average.
that's what I mean. Is like, what are we talking about here? If everything goes right in terms of right, Sam Darnold is average. We can't put the bar much higher than that if we're being reasonable.
Defense wins games and you stay healthy.
I think
that's a dice roll.
I think 9 or 10. And part of it would have to be, when you say everything, would have to be that Green Bay isn't as good as you think. Caleb Williams struggles to start his career. All that sort of stuff would have to go right as well. And then I think you're in the playoffs. I think it would be aggressive to say anything more than that.
Or say, if 5 of the 9 wins were against your division opponents,
right,
that may make it worthwhile for you too, because you're obviously going to have to go through Green Bay and Detroit at the very least, if not Chicago, just to be relevant. And that's a new dynamic that the NFC North hasn't really had much in the last 10 or 15 years. It's been Minnesota or Green Bay.
BS stuff says, if Darnold plays well, should he work with the team to stay and compete or back up JJ McCarthy? No, I think that he'll get a job if he plays well.
And it's not
else.
the Vikings' choice. It'll be his choice.
They would have to franchise tag him or sign him. I don't think you're going to do that.
He's playing for another job.
The level that Sam Darnold will have to play for them to have any conversation about should we bring him back and start him next year would be 13 wins, 12 wins.
Kurt Warner.
It would have to be insane, right? It has to be NFC Championship. And what makes that easier is as good as JJ McCarthy was. So you don't even have to have that conversation. McCarthy was really good in training camp. He was really good in preseason.
No reason he can't pick up on that.
Right. They saw all they needed to see. They don't have to have that discussion. Sean, good to see you, Sean. Vikings will have a run game, and I have a sneaking suspicion that they will have a good run defense, so you could be confident in going for it or punting. I mean, the run game is very much a yet-to-be-seen thing for me. Aaron Jones looks fantastic. He is the best running back since Dalvin Cook was in his prime here. He's got burst still. He's so shifty. It's hard to describe, but you expect someone to be there, and then they're not with Aaron Jones. He's so shifty. He's tough. He's intelligent. Really about the health for Aaron Jones. And if he were to go down, then Ty Chandler again, and I think we're still talking about, are they a good run team? Can they actually run the ball? I need to see a big sample of it with Aaron Jones to really know whether it's the coaching, the play calling, the design, the guards, the scheme, or just Alexander Madison last year was just not that good.
And it doesn't even necessarily have to mean production as in 110, 120 yards or, 3.5 a carry. It means getting a critical first down. It means keeping the clock moving. It means protecting the football. That's base level. And if they can have that and a little bit more, then you have more options. You have more confidence in your passing game, and you're in a little bit more control of the game as well.
So in just a couple minutes, we're going to start giving you guys some bold predictions that we wrote down. Because we're trying to project the season, we're looking at these win totals. We're going to look at some more, not just the Vikings, but thought it was an interesting discussion of all the different scenarios. So what I want from you guys now, and Jake has come through with the fantasy question, so I'm going to get to that in a second. See how good these people are? They're locked in.
Your base.
These people are locked in. Now I forgot what I was going to say. What was the question? Sorry. I wanted to get to one more question.
Stop multitasking.
Yes. One more question, and then the fantasy question, then bold predictions. So I want you guys keep asking your Vikings questions, but also if you want to throw some bold predictions of your own into the chat, we can talk about yours as well. But Romaine threw this one out there. Chance of Tannehill signing, could Mullins still be traded? I don't think that Kevin O'Connell wants to part ways with the guy who knows the offense the best, which is Nick Mullins, but I don't think it's a crazy thought about Ryan Tannehill. If Sam Darnold were to be banged up, that's about as best you could do, would be to get Ryan Tannehill.
When's the trade deadline?
Not till week
early
8.
November.
Did they move it back? 8? Yeah. I mean, it's it's deep into the season. But I think if you're Tannehill, you're just chilling and waiting.
Yeah.
Like Joe Flacco did.
You can cherry pick your best opportunity.
Yeah, you don't have to do that now. Now, this is an active listener, Jake. Fantasy question: who is a later round player that you're targeting and trying to get? Doesn't have to be a Viking. Well, that is a good question.
Later round.
Okay, so I'll give you a former Viking and a current Viking. Later round draft pick. So I've been doing a lot of these best ball drafts on Underdog Fantasy, who just happens to present the show.
Smooth.
And is a big sponsor to our show.
Subtle.
So I might as well tell you a little more about that before I answer your question. Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to play fantasy sports, and is also the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. I've been doing a bunch of best ball drafts, but also you got to check out Pick'em. Very easy to play. Just to pick between 2 and 8 stats from your favorite players. Choose whether they will go higher or lower, and you can make up to 20 times your money by going 5 for 5. So you got the higher or lower on, say, Sam Darnold, higher or lower, 220 yards in the first week. I'll have to look them up when we get to week 1, and we'll do some of those and have fun on the show. But that's how it works. Go for 5. You make some money there. And you can sign up at Underdog Fantasy with the promo code PURPLE. If you do that, it helps the show. So if you're thinking about fantasy this year, jump in. You get a special pick and a first-time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash. Must be 18 or older. Terms of concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. Great job to Jake. Shout out to you, sir, for the fantasy question. And now I will answer it. I got Johnny Munt as a late round player because I
TJ Hawkinson's down till week what?
That's it. TJ Hawkinson could be out for a while. He hasn't done anything yet. And Johnny Munt, I just wrote about this today. They freaking love this guy.
He made some great plays last year.
I know.
Impact plays.
I know. There's a catch he made against the Lions that was downright spectacular. He had another one like that in camp. He's been tight end 1. It's not Josh Oliver. It's been Johnny Munt the whole way. I asked Wes Phillips about him yesterday, and the guy gushed for like 5 minutes about how much they love Johnny Munt. Who saw it coming? Not me. But
I don't think anybody outside of Minnesota really knows who Johnny Munt is.
Jalen Naylor would be another one. You guys know him that I keep looking at. But I think KJ Osborne in New England, with their lack of great wide receivers, they're going to have to
be a star.
It's going to have to be by committee. He's going to have to be involved quite a bit. That's a guy that I'm taking a pretty close look at. And I don't know where Josh Palmer from the Chargers is going in these drafts, but I don't think it's very high. Who else is Herbert throwing to? Quentin Johnston needs to step up. Lad McConkey they drafted, but Palmer has been around a while. He might be the guy. So there you go. There is your fantasy question presented by Underdog. Great job to Jake. Now, bold predictions, throw them in there along with Vikings questions. Let's answer a few more, and then we'll get to ours. What did you write down? 37 of them?
I got 7 of them.
Okay.
I could have done more if I'd had a little more advance notice.
Oh, okay. I told you.
I do have a real job too, right?
What? Gary says, can they score 24 points a game? I don't think so.
That's optimistic.
How many points a game do they have to score? Let me look this up.
What's the mean
I'm gonna look this up.
Help me out with that.
You take a guess at, I'll look it up, what scoring last year would put you, where do they have to rank to be a playoff team? You think like 15th?
Between 10 and 15.
Okay. What do you think that is for how many points?
I'll give you the answer 22 to 26.
That's a big difference.
Actually, not
22 to 26 is like ranking first or last.
You're right. 22 to 24.
Okay. Oh wait, that's 2024. Everybody wait patiently. I'll do 3 more ad reads.
This is live.
Well, sometimes it takes time to look stuff up on my phone. Let's see. Scoring offense. Okay, now I've got this. Points per game. The team that ranked in the middle of the league last year was Seattle. That's a middle of the league team last year in points. 21.4 was a middling offense last year in the NFL.
And they were in contention until week 17.
A bad offense was Carolina at 13.9, less than 2 touchdowns a game. The Vikings better do better than that. So essentially, if you could get 3 touchdowns a game, you're right in the mix.
What was the one playoff team with the lowest point total? I mean, what was the low-hanging fruit on that last wild card team?
Pittsburgh, but they had a great defense, and that's Tomlin's team. They average 18. If you're going to be a mediocre playoff team, you're probably looking. Okay, Tampa Bay was at 20.5 and they ranked 20th in scoring. You probably have to be better than that. I'm going to say they
22 to 24.
They need 22 points a game to be an above average offense. That's where I would go. All right, let's make some bold predictions and then we'll circle back on the questions and your bold predictions. I'm going to start off. So we did these. I've got some Vikings ones and around the league.
I do too.
Okay. So I'm going to start off with an around the league one, and then we could do some Vikings ones. Aaron Rodgers will play 7 games this year, and Robert Saleh will be fired in week 15. That is my first bold prediction of the year. I just don't think Rodgers' body's going to hold up. And when it doesn't, they'll collapse and they're going to fire their coach.
I agree with what you're saying. I don't know if it's going to take till week 15. I think he gets fired in week 10 or 12, especially if Rodgers is done after 7 games and the bad vibes engulf that team as they always do. That you could see that team laying down for the last 6-7 weeks. I don't think Saleh lasts that long.
So I think
under that scenario,
Saleh. So I think, yeah, you getting names backwards. You and Jeremiah Searles both on this show. This getting names backwards, but
I just don't type them as much as I used to.
That's right. That's right. That's how it sticks in my brain. I could still spell Adofo-mensah.
Oh my Lord!
With no notes. Anyway, Aaron Rodgers. Right? Yeah. I was wondering. Wait, is Adofo-mensah still in the league? Aaron Rodgers skipping minicamp probably is not a big deal if Aaron Rodgers is 25 years old, 30 years old, but the way that he is treated this year has almost been I could just show up and do whatever. And that makes me wonder about how he trained the entire offseason and whether his body is ready to take on the entire 17 games. It is a grind out there. But I think the reason I put week 15 is because they have Tyrod Taylor, their backup, that he could get him a few wins. Oh, Tyrod, good story. And then he goes into the Tyrod mode and Robert Saleh loses his job. So there's my first bold prediction. What's yours?
Mike Zimmer will replace Mike McCarthy as interim Cowboys head coach when Jones fires McCarthy and Dallas is 3-6. They will respond to the grumpy old man and rip off 8 straight wins to charge into the playoffs at 11-7 before losing to Detroit in the first round.
Oh my gosh. So
I'm going far down the line here, but the boldest thing I can say is Mike Zimmer will be a head coach by October.
I said bold, you went bold. Mike Zimmer becomes the head coach in October, takes them to the playoffs. That is bold.
What's more bold? The fact that he takes over or that he actually gets them to the playoffs?
No, I don't think it's bold that he gets them to the playoffs. Mike can coach. I mean, sometimes.
Well, and look at that roster.
We talk about other things with how it went with Zimmer, but I've never thought that he couldn't coach a football team or prepare a team or have a good defense or something like that. Jonathan Harrison cannot stand Mike McCarthy. It's like his least favorite person in the world, and just texted yes in all capital letters of McCarthy getting axed. The patience is not going to be very high for
He's got the hottest hot seat right out there right now.
I think, yeah, which is weird because he's been amazing in the regular season the last few years, and they've had one of the best offenses in the league, and they even improved offensively last year after surprisingly moving on from Kellen Moore as their offensive coordinator. I still am going to stay with the opposite side of this, which is that Dallas is just really good, and all this offseason meant nothing. It seems like a classic Dallas thing to have everyone talking about, oh, Dallas is a mess. They're not doing this. They're doing that. They should have signed that guy. And then they just
why are they hoarding all their money?
They've got a very talented team. And I think that Mike Zimmer is the right guy for that defensive unit. And they're probably better than they were last year on defense. Should be just as good on offense. Maybe save a little bit for the running game. So I don't think this will happen, but I love the boldness of this prediction. Let me move on to my next one.
We didn't say they'd have to be true. We just wanted bold.
Bold, yeah. Well,
or likely.
I mean, when you're making the prediction, you're saying it can happen. Yeah, right, this is what you think's going to happen. I agree,
but you got to go out on a limb a bit.
All right, let me scroll a little bit to get a Vikings one mixed in here. Did I had Vikings somewhere? Okay,
I got one for you if you need it.
Oh, how about whoops. This you can tell when I started writing these. I've got a JJ McCarthy one in there. I gotta delete that, unfortunately.
He predicts JJ McCarthy will throw 257 passes.
I started writing
in the simulator.
I started writing this a few weeks ago when I just every time one popped into my head, I threw it down there because I tried to do 50 before each season, so then we could go through them later. And I did think J.J. McCarthy was going to throw 257 passes. But instead, how about this? Justin Jefferson will finish third in receiving, and Dallas Turner will get 5.5 sacks. Third in receiving for Jefferson, 5.5 sacks for Dallas Turner. What do you think of those? Not bold enough?
I think you could go a little bit higher on the sack total. Would you not maybe get in closer to 10? Or is he just that raw?
I think they've got two other guys that are going to play a lot. He's going to be a rotational type of guy.
Okay, but you don't think he's going to have his one moment each game?
And get 17?
Yeah, no. Justin Jefferson finishes third. Who's better than him? Who's more productive than him?
Tyreek Hill is going to get the ball a ton.
Someone in Dallas?
I was thinking CeeDee Lamb, but he's going to play, right? Jamar Chase may want to make a statement for his contract. How about if Aaron Rodgers does stay healthy, Garrett Wilson?
Sure.
Could end up with top receiving. It's hard to come up with many guys who could get more receiving yards than Justin Jefferson, but I went third.
But he's got Sam Darnold thrown to him.
I think those are very reasonable projections. They probably weren't bold enough, but I thought 5.5 sacks, pretty good for Dallas Turner. Still a super season. I get asked a lot about Jefferson and whether he's still going to be the guy. Even if Sam Darnold does not play well, he's still throwing to Justin Jefferson. That's not going to stop. Or better not. Then he's going to play really bad. What's your next one? That was not hot by me.
Kirk Cousins.
Oh, no.
Because I just wanted to tweak you.
Of course.
Will be greeted warmly by Vikings
here for
fans.
Free.
But you're going to like how this goes.
I'm buying later. Go ahead.
Yeah, you are. That's a good point.
That's right. Be careful with where you go with this.
All I want is In-N-Out Burger. Cousins will be greeted warmly by Vikings fans when he returns with the Falcons in December. He will get sacked 5 times by Vikings defenders, unleashed by Brian Flores. He'll be chased to the sideline groggy after the 5th sack and lead a game-winning touchdown drive in the waning moments before giving all glory to God and thanking those kind fans for shoveling snow from the driveway of his Inver Grove Heights McMansion he's now renting out to Sam Darnold.
Wow.
Now, I had to write that.
I was going to say.
It's not top of head. Top of mind.
Mine are one sentence. Yours are an entire
You
fan
wanted
fiction.
boldness.
This isn't boldness. This is fan fiction.
Which part of it? The comeback? Everything else seems about right.
Actually, yeah.
You think he's going to get booed?
Oh, okay. I think one of my bold predictions was that Michael Penix starts against the Vikings because he's already hurt. I mean, I don't know if he's going to be able to play the full season. He's coming off an Achilles at 36 years old, but this is actually a very realistic prediction.
Atlanta's going to be a good team.
I think they should be a good team, and Cousins playing a close game and coming through at the end kept happening over the last couple of seasons.
Despite getting beat up.
And it was always the guy who starts the fire and puts the fire out. Like, he would cause them to be in a close game they shouldn't have been in.
He's a clutch arsonist.
Right. There's a clutch arsonist. There's a strip sack in there. What do you think he's going to do? Yeah. How many games do you think Kirk's going to win in Atlanta?
I think they're going to win 10 games. Now, you mentioned, the Penix factor, which I don't see Penix necessarily breathing down his neck from a performance standpoint. It would probably be injury that pushes him in there more so. I know what you said. He's coming off a major Achilles injury, but he has been durable his whole career. So what are you looking at?
I'm looking at one of your other bold predictions.
It was just a throwaway one. I never said I was going to. Why are you reading over my shoulder here? And I'm trying to make a point.
Now you have to say
now
that.
I teased him later, but we'll get to it later. But we're talking Cousins.
You were going into this whole thing about their offense or whatever, and I look over and I see what your bold prediction is, and I got totally distracted. Sorry. What were you saying about the Falcons?
I think the Falcons are clearly the NFC South is probably as tough a division as the North is going to be. But why do you not see him succeeding? Just because of the age factor, the injury factor.
I mean, I looked up quarterbacks.
This is a guy that started how many consecutive times before his Achilles? Now, I'm not saying Achilles
before the worst injury you can have. Yeah.
Is it the worst injury?
I think so. I mean, if someone ripped your heart out and threw it on the ground in the game, that would be worse. But I mean, as far as general injuries that happen, that's one of the worst that you can have. One of the hardest to recover.
What did Marino do? And he was probably in his late 30s when he tore it, right?
That was Achilles. Yeah, he was younger.
And Cousins is not Dan Marino.
Right.
I get that. But what was the factor? How different was I'm trying to remember how hobbled he was after that.
Well, he couldn't move at all. I mean,
He never could before that.
Marino early in his career, he was pretty mobile. I mean, he could move around in the pocket. He wasn't going to run, but he was pretty efficient at moving around. He dropped off significantly a couple of years later, but that was a long time ago, and it's a different surgery now than it is then. I looked up quarterbacks that were non-Hall of Famers and how they performed past the age of 35. There's not a lot that were ever good. I mean, our buddy Rich Gannon was pretty good for the Raiders at like 38, but there are not very many that have gone into this age, especially non-elitely skilled. Doesn't have an elite arm, doesn't have any mobility. It's a hard world to play in when you are that age coming off a big injury, and I just wonder how much juice is going to be there. He was already drifting a little bit on the velocity on the football, I thought, from where he had been early in his career, and he was making up for it with understanding KOC's offense. Is he going to be crazy different than when he had Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen? Like, I don't know. I mean, they have a good offensive line. They have a good running game. Their defense is very spotty. I look at them as just kind of a 500 team.
It would be very much a Kirk Cousins move, though, to do what he does.
100%. Take 100 mil guaranteed and go 500.
And then wonder why they drafted someone behind him.
That's exactly right. All right, read the one that I was laughing at when I looked over here.
Well, you're underselling it now. But again, when you said bold predictions, I didn't know we were going to get down deep in the weeds on statistics or anything. I'm just trying to have a little bit of fun.
All right, this is bold.
All right, Taylor Swift will dump Travis Kelce before the playoffs. There will be plenty of blown kisses shared and bandwidth melted throughout their regular season, but you can kiss this combo goodbye after Netflix airs Chiefs at Steelers Christmas Day and the streaming service gets the viewership it needs. They're parting ways.
So you think that is this a suggestion that there's a conspiracy that they have had this relationship as part of promotional type of thing? Is that the suggestion there?
I think it's just going to run its course.
Oh, I see.
But I see what you're saying with the Netflix. I think the reason that they're going to hang on that long is they will try to cash in one more time.
You know, I have noticed about Taylor Swift that she has some relationship issues throughout her career.
She tends to write about them a little too.
A song or two maybe dedicated to the former men of her life. I don't have a comment on this because
you're disgusted. It's very non-footballish.
Don't know the inner workings of Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce's
I don't either. I'm just throwing it on the wall.
I like it. It is bold.
If they weren't playing on Christmas and Netflix wasn't doing the game, I wouldn't even venture down.
Is it bold to say that Taylor Swift would break up with somebody?
No, I said no. You're right.
No.
It's the timing of it.
I don't think that's bold. All right, back to football ones. I've got Jim Harbaugh finishing second in the West and getting Coach of the Year votes, and I have Doug Peterson being fired.
I had Harbaugh winning Coach of the Year too, as much as it pains me to say that, because there's nobody as self-involved, I think, as Mr. Harbaugh, but I think his credentials speak for themselves. I mean, he just won a national championship. He's got Justin Herbert. He's poised after being out of the league for 10 years to come in and take a kind of rattle the Chargers a bit, rattle the NFL. There's no reason to believe he won't succeed again. I didn't think of them finishing behind the Chiefs, probably going to finish behind the Chiefs, but I could see them pulling off 10 wins and he gets Coach of the Year. So we're in agreement on that.
It just feels like that team was coached so poorly before, and they had a lot of addition by subtraction. Guys who left who were washed. And it will open the door for better players. They'll have a much better defense. And Harbaugh, he quickly burns out places and ends up under investigation or whatever at Michigan for multiple different things. He's already suspended.
He can get away with what he wants in the NFL.
That's not even the thing that you think he would be suspended for. I did see Connor Stallions showed up coaching a high school team in Michigan. What a great decision I'm sure that was. But I don't really believe in the Raiders very much. I definitely don't believe in the Broncos very much. That puts them in line to win a good amount of games in their division other than against Kansas City. And it feels like there's a Harbaugh win against Kansas City in week whatever, middle of the season. Kansas City will have that lull, and then he jumps to the middle of the field on the logo and dances around, does something crazy. I could see that. What about Doug Peterson being fired, Jacksonville?
Long overdue, right? No, I would say long overdue.
Yeah.
What's Trevor Lawrence going to be? Which Trevor Lawrence is going to show up this season? I mean, I'm wondering. He seemed to be on that path to kind of match Burrows, to match Herbert, to match in Mahomes. It's sort of, the AFC has the dominant arms, right? And then not so much. And I'm wondering how much is that is Peterson? How much is that Lawrence plateauing, the pieces around him? Maybe they weren't as good as we thought they were. But I would agree that if Jacksonville doesn't make a move, or make an impact this offseason, he's probably looking at Sean McDermott in that capacity too, talking about a hot seat.
Yeah, I agree with that. McDermott, sort of a victim of setting the bar high and then not reaching it. And the same goes for
and you can
Doug
never
Peterson.
get back there again sometimes.
Right. I mean, Peterson comes in after Urban Meyer. They get to the playoffs. They win a playoff game. So, of course, the response is, whoa, Doug Peterson turned this around. But if you only turn it around to being 500 and you don't take another step after that, then you get fired.
And you don't keep ascending with a franchise-level quarterback.
But I also really wonder, there's a couple of coaches who a few years ago were pretty good offensively and defensively. A lot of the Vic Fangio stuff got talked about. And then the world changed again. It was like what was working, then changed for what was working again. And I just didn't see a lot of creativity. I didn't see a lot of motion. I just didn't see the things that I'm seeing from some of the better offenses with Doug Peterson. How easy are you making life for Trevor Lawrence? And they did draft a wide receiver, but they don't have a great wide receiver. They have a lot of, I guess you could throw it underneath to that guy, and not a ton of guys where you're looking at, let me bomb it down the field with his giant arm and make him into a real playmaker. If they're average, then he probably gets let go, and they go looking for the quarterback guru, next guru up, I think would have to be it. But
the next KLC.
They would hire someone younger, I think, after going with an older coach in Doug Peterson. Is that bold to you, or is that a little too?
It's boldish. It's
boldish. 8.5 is their over under for the Jags. If they go under, I think Peterson's gone. One more from you that's appropriate.
Greg Olsen will replace Tom Brady and reclaim his place as top analyst at Fox. Because despite winning an Emmy and universal respect, Olsen, we know, was demoted to the second team. They had to place the seat warm for Brady. Why? Because Fox promised Brady the top job would be waiting for him. Brady's been fake and Belichick's for years. He'll grow bored, be tempted to return to the field, and all the blowback will chase him out of the booth.
I could see him not really being used to people hammering him for something if he's not good.
And if you're going to be an NFL analyst, you are an open book for that.
The internet hates everything. So
correct.
Yeah, that
I honestly, I don't see Brady playing again, but I could see him not settling into a kind of a staid, controlled setting of the booth, despite getting all the top-notch games. Now, I didn't know what kind of analyst Greg Olsen was going to be. He's a fantastic analyst. And I think part of this is me just thinking he kind of got a raw deal from Fox after being sort of named in a lot of different polls and whatnot, the best analyst out there, after Romo's kind of taken a bit of a tumble. So the fact that, Brady had this seat warmed all along just until he could figure his world out, and Olsen actually kind of came in and did the job and did it well, makes me wonder if this is going to leave a lot of egg on the face of Fox executives. And again, Brady strikes me as somebody that was so dedicated to football and so immersed in the game. Is he going to find fulfillment and success analyzing it?
I think this could go either way. The way that Brady has been talking in his interviews, although he rants about quarterback development, and he sort of sounds like old man yells at cloud sometimes when he's saying, well, he can't hit the quarterbacks anymore and that kind of stuff. I don't need the quarterbacks to get demolished. The numbers haven't jumped way up in scoring. It's okay if they don't break limbs constantly. Yeah, I don't know. I guess if I got destroyed as a young quarterback and then I saw the young quarterbacks get to be protected by the rules, I might be jealous. Maybe he is jealous. So far, he is a really good talker, but will he actually see something he doesn't like and say it? Will he? Because that was Drew Brees' problem.
Everybody was great.
Drew Brees knows the game better than any person walking around the earth, but he didn't seem like it, because he seemed like he was just trying to say something nice about someone on every play. And you can't do that because someone screws up on every play as well. I want to see how critical Brady is. And Greg Olson seemed to be very analytical about that stuff. Like, well, here's what went wrong, trying to break it down. I'll give you another take, though, when it comes to broadcasts. Maybe this is because I cover a lot of games and I'm there in the stadium. I don't really care.
Yeah, that's been a development in my life since I'm not at the stadium covering as many games. I'm on the couch
So
like
now
every
you care
other
a lot.
American. And now I want to be treated with respect. I want to be entertained. I don't want Romo talking to Jim like he's his favorite date. I feel like, we're all pining away for John Madden, right? And nobody's ever going to be John Madden. But I just wonder with Brady, he's had so much success. Obviously, he doesn't need the money. He doesn't need the relevancy. Is he going to get bored with this?
It's a good question. Yeah, when I watch football, a lot of times I have it turned down to where I can't really hear what the broadcasters are saying. I just sort of hear the crowd noise. I, of course, listened to a lot of John Madden growing up when I was 13. But as far as now goes, nobody is so much must listen that I'm going to turn it up. And a lot of it is because it's so much fluff. And there's no play-by-play person that makes me go, oh, wow, it's Dale Michaels Monday Night Football. I mean, I was turning that up all the way to listen to him and Frank and Dan because there was so much there. There was a lot of energy. They would make jokes. They would laugh. They would get super into football. I just feel like it's kind of vanilla.
A little more corporate, a little more structured.
It's almost like we're paying these guys so much money. We don't want them to ever cause any sort of stir by being too critical or even having too much fun. Romo yells a lot, but I don't know that it's that fun.
No, I think he's just he's almost like a kid in some ways.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it endeared him to a lot of viewers and listeners early on because he seemed to be so in sync with what every quarterback's doing. But now it feels like he's just a little kid in the sandbox. Jim, look what he had. Did you see that,
Yeah.
Jim?
Yep.
You can almost see him like grabbing Nance's thigh every time.
You didn't
there's
need
a big
to do
play.
that below the table just now, but
you didn't need to admit it either.
Well, I didn't need to enjoy it. Let's do this for another half an hour or so. Let's answer some questions. We have nowhere to be. There is a steak place in here that we have been
320 on the West Coast.
So let's answer, and hopefully you guys threw some bold predictions in there and ripped.
I want to see some. Yeah, I want to see some feedback on our bold predictions.
Well, let's
and some of the boldest ones out there.
Let's just go down the list here and answer some questions that were still thrown in. We've got time. Nowhere to be. No rush. Let's start off with BS stuff. Says, what's your outlook on the in-division records of each team? Vikings, Bears, Lions, Packers. Will a team break out in division or will they just beat up on each other? I tend to think, Murph, that they always beat up on each other. Is there a team that you think that is better suited to play the other teams? So are the Vikings better suited to play the other teams because they have defense? Are the Packers, the Lions? I just feel like there's a lot of whooping on each other when it comes to this division, but maybe you feel differently.
No, there will be some whooping, but I do think, and I'm not trying to be a homer here, but I do believe the Lions have separated themselves from the pack based on what they did last season, being on the doorstep, pretty much coming back intact, more confident. You got to imagine more driven. There's no guarantee they'll be on the doorstep again, but I feel like they have an opportunity to break away from the pack, literally and figuratively. But I do think the Packers are coming.
I think the Lions have a case for the strongest roster in the entire NFC, which puts them ahead. I don't know that Ford Field is the home field advantage that Lambeau is, but maybe now, the way that those home fields are now, as opposed to when they were mediocre or bad.
Green Bay still has the outdoor element that they will always have in January.
That's what I was thinking about, that it'll even out. I think it will be fairly even. The only team you could see just completely falling apart is, I think, Chicago.
Because their expectations are too high.
Well, and because they have a rookie quarterback.
Right.
Is that it's more likely with a rookie quarterback that he just struggles in those games against really tough defenses. If the Packers defense isn't improved, though, they could be just okay instead of great. I don't know. The division's hard to figure out because everyone's pretty good. Sean says
it's a new element.
Right. And there's so much has changed with the division that we don't really know on a lot of these things. We're looking for a lot of answers, which is why we watch the games. When I was thinking about today, the last time I covered a game,
January 7th.
Oh my God, it was so long ago. I need a football game so bad.
A real game.
right after this, I'm going to tackle the hell out of you. I cannot.
I swear I won't touch your thigh again.
Since January. No, that was the good part. But it's just been so long since there's been football. It's ridiculous. Sean says if they move from a shaky top 15 defense to top 10 and remain a top 10 offense or better, only 9 wins. No, if they do that, they'll win more than 9. But my question is, are you really getting to better than a top 10 offense? That would be incredible if they were able to do that. I think if they're the 15th best offense.
We were just saying 22 points can do it.
Yeah, if they're the 15th best offense in the league, then they can make the playoffs. Sean also asks any word on who's playing this weekend. Jaron Hall's going to start, and no one else that you should really be all that concerned about. I would never suggest that you shouldn't watch a game or watch the post game, but I don't think there's a lot of implications, is what I would say. There's not a lot of ramifications for this game. This is going to be the
hay is in the barn, as you said.
That's what I said, and that's what I think. So let me scroll down here. Dallas Turner for defensive rookie of the year would be bold. Leads the team in sacks for Dallas Turner would be bold.
More than 5.5?
Well, yeah, I guess 5.5 wasn't that bold. It's fair enough. Fair enough. If I said he leads the team, but it just seems like too much when you have Jonathan Grenard, who had 12.5 last year. All right, let me see here. Sean is crushing the comment section, says Rodgers can still throw, but his escape prowess will hinder him, either more sacks or throwaways or more injuries potentially. Gary, I want to know your opinion on this. Gary says that Jordan Love will struggle this year. It's a bold. That's
bold. And maybe he's peacocking a little bit because of the new contract. There's nothing I've seen that indicates that he's in for a downfall. I mean, this has been a steady ascension, and it wasn't so much of a flash. But the expectations are high again. So how's he going to respond to that? You don't know when somebody gets paid and the bar is high how they're going to respond because he hasn't been a proven veteran. So it's a bold prediction. It's not out of the realm.
I think with Jordan Love, if he presses too much, if he tries too hard to be Mr. Contract, I'm a franchise quarterback, I'm the next Rodgers. I mean, maybe that would have already started to happen last year.
Probably.
But you got 9 months, or in their case, 7.5 months, because they were in the playoffs and the Vikings weren't. Then you have all that time to hear people say how great you are and you get paid. And maybe there could be a little leak in that says, now I got to do too much. Sort of like a basketball player that he's not taking the shot he's only taking the smart shot. But then it's paid the centerpiece of the team. Now he's taking some dumber shots just because you feel like there's that pressure there. You're always a few interceptions away from not having the same type of season. That's bold. But I don't think it's going to change a ton with Jordan Love at this point. He actually is veteran aged now, even though we've only seen him for 1 season.
Correct.
How about this one for bold? Niners will miss the playoffs. That's very bold.
I mean, maybe the drama that's been playing out there will have a corrosive effect. Not making the playoffs seems like a stretch. I mean, that sounds catastrophic injury type scenario or chronic underachieving that I haven't seen any indication that a Kyle Shanahan team will collapse like that. I mean, the Niners are up there with the Lions as far as expectations. What are their Super Bowl?
Niners, they are 11.5 wins. That's a lot. That would be, it would have to take Brock Purdy getting hurt for them to miss the playoffs. That would make it possible.
But you can say that about any team if they lose their quarterback.
Gazinkid thinks that Adrian Peterson will finally announce his retirement this year. Is he still trying to make a comeback?
The creditors are after him.
Oh, come on. That's tough. Nice.
What, being bankrupt?
It is tough. Mismanaging the money, having people around you that maybe take advantage of it. That's not something you want to see from anybody.
I'm not rooting for it,
No.
but I mean, that's the only reason he's been barking about playing the last few years is because he needs to pay off creditors.
He should have played in the XFL.
He did his boxing match.
Did he really?
He did a boxing match.
Oh,
yeah.
That's right. Didn't go well, right?
No, it did not go well. He got planted pretty early.
Okay. I do have a vague memory of this. Vikings top 5 offense, top 7 defense is extremely bold. And I don't think
Top
that's
5 offense?
Yeah, that would be insane.
He must be Canadian. Sean,
Yeah.
are you Canadian?
With
With
yeah, with
offense?
the C. Yeah, that's right. That's how you spell it when you were covering hockey.
It's a process, Matthew.
These people,
Trust
yeah,
the
I know.
process.
Yeah, organization. People seem to think,
Detroit.
people, I think, are being a little unreasonable with the Dallas Turner expectations. Maybe me saying 5.5 is bold the opposite way. That it's like a low expectation. I think 5.5 sacks for a rookie who's going to be mixing in with a couple other players is a pretty solid season. I don't think that that's like a negative on Dallas Turner. I've seen good things from him. I just don't think he's in position to go in and get 15 sacks. But the expectation for you guys seems to be like that he's going to do that really quickly. Lee's got a good one. Brian Dable will be the first head coach fired. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that sounds about right. The Giants just, I haven't watched any of the Hard Knocks, the mini camp Hard Knocks.
The off-season one, you mean, with the Giants?
Yeah, were there any revelations in there that would indicate that they are not falling into the abyss?
Not really, no. I mean, they did.
Daniel Jones coming into US Bank Stadium a year and a half ago. How do you reconcile that?
Well, that would be the thing about Dable and the Giants is that Daniel Jones probably isn't as bad as he was last year. He is probably closer to the quarterback that beat the Vikings and then played really well in the game that the Giants lost on the 60-yard Greg Joseph field goal. I think Daniel Jones deserve this. Here's a hot take for you. Maybe not bold. Maybe we'll call it bold. I think it's a bold take that Daniel Jones deserves one season of his life with anything around him that wasn't Saquon Barkley. Because if you go through their receivers, oh my sweet Moses, they were bad. I mean, it was like Darius Slayton and injured player X. Richie James was ripping apart the Vikings and then didn't have a job the next year, I think. I mean, they were running out guys who I had never heard of, and I don't think Giants fans had ever heard of, for Daniel Jones. And drafting Malik Neighbors is a pretty big deal. They were trying to run out. Were they the ones that signed Golden Tate when he was 50 years old? Yeah, I mean, who was the other one? Allen Robinson they've just tried to throw crap at the wall with that receiver position, but now they finally have some talent there that I just want to see him get a chance and see what that really looks like with some actual receiving talent. I'm not saying he's a franchise quarterback. I'm not saying he's great, but week 1, they're going to play the Vikings, and Malik Neighbors, you're going to have to guard him. Hunter says Vikings will intercept Daniel Jones 3 times week 1. That's pretty bold.
It is very bold. And where was that in January of 23?
Daniel Jones was banged up a lot last year. Yes, Sean is Canadian, by the way. Well, I mean, I don't think, does anybody else spell it that way? Let's see. BS stuff says Gilmore will have an interception his first game as a Viking. I could see that.
That sounds right.
You both are tending to think the same way, that Daniel Jones is going to throw it to the other team. I just feel like he is not as bad as he has looked at times. He certainly is not as good as he looked against Ed Donatell's defense, which was mind-blowing. But there's a better version there than we saw last year or even early in his career.
Enough to say Brian Dable.
What does this thing here think of the NFC East outside of the Cowboys? Let's see. Cowboys are at 10.5, and the Eagles are at 10.5. How about this for a bold one? What if the Eagles miss the playoffs? That's pretty bold.
That's very bold.
But is Nick Sirianni good, or was it Shane Steichen?
You're asking the wrong guy on that. But Sirianni,
do you know who Shane Steichen is?
What are you, offensive coordinator? I don't
there
know.
You go. And the head coach currently of the Colts.
Yeah, sorry. I haven't been paying attention to the Colts moves lately.
How do you pronounce Robert Saleh?
Saleh.
Yes, Saleh. Oh, man.
Yeah, did the Jets fire their coach first or the Giants fire their coach first?
They
are sharpening their knives in New York.
Either one. No, with the Eagles, though, losing Jason Kelsey. Was that as unexpected? No, it wasn't unexpected. It just might be a big deal. He's one of their best players. What if I just made up a guy and said he was the offensive coordinator?
I nod.
Okay.
Knowingly.
I mean, Jed Clampett for the Jets. I don't like what he's doing at defensive coordinator.
He should go out and look for oil.
Okay, but this, at least the over-unders, the expectations, they want the Eagles and Cowboys to be pretty good here.
And the Giants are at?
The Giants are at 6.5, right with the Vikings. Shouldn't that say, though?
So that week 1 matchup is
a barn
high
burner.
stakes.
Yeah. We'll get Dick Stockton and Matt Millen.
Respective Vegas on the line.
Remember all those old Vikings games that didn't come on. I had to
Chris Myers.
You had to catch that. Oh, the Chris Myers games. Yeah. Shout out to Chris Myers. Good broadcaster, but not the game you want. Not if you were in the AFC, it was Marv Albert. If you got Marv, you were like, oh man. The Vikings had one against the Jets. It was a terrible matchup. Jets were horrible, and it was like Marv Albert and Chris Spielman, and Chris spent the whole time talking about how he was related to Rick Spielman, and the wind. They were obsessed with the wind in that game.
In the Meadowlands,
if you got, it was Dick and Matt Millen called like 80% of the Vikings games that were against random
Sam Rosen.
Oh, Sam Rosen. I like Sam Rosen. I heard
he's very good. Yeah, he's walking away from the Rangers too.
We've gotten to this point in the
we are just babbling now.
Podcast where I'm just making fun of you about.
We're going into 3 hours here,
and yet Gary's still firing out hot takes, bold takes that the Bears beat the Packers twice. What do you think of the Bears? Are you a Caleb Williams believer?
I'm a believer-ish. What am I supposed to say with that? Because I've been reading some decent tweets out of his camp performances. I want to. Justin Fields had a lot of high marks coming in too. So I believe he was the best quarterback picked, but Chicago is notoriously a place where quarterbacks go to die. So
okay, there's a question for you since we're this far into it, and I am so honored that all of you are still watching and throwing in bold takes. Do you think that franchises actually have these identities, or it's just a coincidence? So the Vikings with kickers, the Bears with quarterbacks. I'm sure, the Chargers had their kicker issues. The Chargers are kind of famous for having quarterbacks that are good that can't get them quite over the top. The Packers with quarterbacks that sit for a while and then become elite. Is that real, or is that just a funny thing that has happened?
I would say maybe the Vikings and their kickers may be more coincidental. It's just because of those, you have visions of 2 painful playoff misses that should have been gimmies that tear at the heart of every Vikings fan. Blair Walsh, Gary Anderson, we know that. But the Bears' ineptitude at quarterback goes back 50 plus years in whoever they draft, whoever they acquire.
Well, what would cause that?
What you say? Coincidence?
Well,
I think mismanagement, poor evaluations, mismanagement. They were a team that has been built and dominated and talked about for 60 years as a defense. From Butkus to the teams in the 80s to Urlacher. You when you think of the Chicago Bears, you think of mud, hard-nosed wins, and defense, and a guy who happens to be there throwing the ball. Now, Jim McMahon was a gamer, but I'm guessing one of us could have probably led the 85 Bears to the at least to the playoffs, if not the Super Bowl. So with the Bears and their quarterbacks, it's been a laundry list of failures in the front office, poor development, injury problems. Vikings and their kickers, I think those are a little bit more of a ghost story.
Okay, but the quarterback thing, they've had tons of different general managers, tons of different rosters, receivers, all those things.
And one ownership.
I think it's just a coincidence. Okay, but let me give you an example about how it's a coincidence. When I was a youth, Jim Kelly was one of the great quarterbacks of the National Football League in Buffalo. And then after Jim Kelly was no longer the quarterback, you had Todd Collins, Doug Flutie / Rob Johnson, Drew Bledsoe, the totally washed version, J.P. Lossman, who actually – the Bills did the same thing that Atlanta did to Kirk, where they had Bledsoe, but they drafted Lossman. And Bledsoe was real upset. Just a little history for you. Not the first time it's ever happened. Kelly Holcomb was there. And then E.J. Manuel, Ryan Fitzpatrick, not in that order maybe, and Tyrod Taylor.
You had me at Flutie.
And then they got Josh Allen, who's like the best quarterback in the league, not named Mahomes.
Okay.
you would have said the same thing. You would have said, come on. I mean,
I don't know, but that was a more
cursed.
compressed period. I'm talking
What do you mean
55
compressed?
years.
That was from the time that I was 10 years old until I was moving from Buffalo to take a new job covering the Vikings as a grown adult. It was like 20 something years.
If the Bears had a Pro Bowl quarterback in 55 years?
I don't know if Jay Cutler ever made one. That's the only one I would have guessed. No, it's longer.
So that's
longer.
It's a long time. We're not talking, half of your teenage years here.
But I just don't think franchises. How about the New Orleans Saints? They had Archie Manning, and he was a good quarterback, but the team was horrible for so long. Then it was Billy Joe Tolliver and Jim Everett and
Bobby Hebert. I don't know if you're old enough to remember
of course,
the
Bobby
Raging Cajun.
Yep, I've been on Bobby Hebert's radio show a couple of times to preview games. It's raging. And what they had Jeff Blake maybe stopped by, Aaron Brooks, and then all of a sudden, Drew Brees shows up with his broke ass shoulder and is great forever. And then they go right back to being horrible at quarterback. It just takes one. I think it's a total coincidence. I don't think there's any reason. What would it be? The grass, the wind, the pressure of Chicago?
I don't think it's the pressure of Chicago. I just think again, bad picks, bad luck, bad management, bad coaching. I don't have the laundry list of failed quarterbacks in Bears history. It's a long one.
It's a long one.
You can't just point to coincidence on it. Somebody's going to own that.
I feel like it's a coincidence. I mean, with the Jets, that's another example. If you draft that high that many times and mess it up every time, that's got to be a coincidence. Anybody would have drafted Sam Darnold high. It just happened to be them that they landed on, and then quarterbacks that were taken later became MVPs. It's a crazy world out there. Romaine, what about Penix not playing in the preseason? Could he be the starter? I don't think so. I assume that Kirk is good to go.
I haven't heard anything else. I
just read the other day that Kirk was playing in their scrimmage and had a good scrimmage. So I assume that Kirk is playing.
It's an awful lot of money to put him on the sideline.
That would be something. If they fell in love with Penix so much, that would be unbelievable. Okay, couple more things, and then we have to eat something because
I'm going to eat the table here.
Do you notice I don't even have a Diet Dr. Pepper here. I can't be the same. Let's see. Okay, I mean, this is an interesting one. Sean says team and fan bases and media can bring angst that permeates the market and takes a strong team to shut out the noise.
Absolutely.
So is it like if you're a Vikings kicker and you arrive here and the TV reporter sticks the camera in your face and says, "Are you aware that this team has a bad history with kickers?" I've seen that happen before.
That's a terrible approach to interviewing a new kicker who probably doesn't care or know.
I've seen it happen. I don't think so. I don't think. I'll give you an example of why I don't believe in this at all. His name is Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards is why I don't believe in this, because the Wolves drafted player after player. They had failed management over and over again. The guy who even drafted Anthony Edwards got run out of town for reasons you can Google. I mean, he's just too good. He didn't care that they lost before. He didn't care that the fans had been negative about the team or that they were cursed or anything else like that. He just came in and was like, "No, I'm the best," and is unbelievable and had him in the Western Conference Final. Just takes one guy.
Yeah, I don't necessarily buy the kicker thing here. It was easy to write about and reference, and it's easy to kind of ruminate about. But there's really two guys. I know there were some other regular season kicks over the years and some kickers that were sloppy over the years, but it's those two kicks in those two moments that have really kind of poisoned the well for Vikings kickers because they were two big moments. I don't necessarily buy that the Vikings are cursed or destined to never have a solid clutch kicker. I do believe, though, that there is something to be said for 55 years of quarterbacking ineptitude to Chicago. So that's where I'm kind of coming, that it can't just be a coincidence.
I think it is. I think it's just a coincidence. I
agree to disagree.
So think about it this way. From a numbers perspective, there are only about...
There are no coincidences.
12...
In numbers.
I guess so. There's always an explanation. There's always percentages. Out of 30 teams 32 teams, 28 teams, depending on when you're talking about with the NFL, 26 teams. There's always about a third of the league that actually has a good quarterback, right?
Sure.
So what are the odds that over a long period of time, one team could continually come up on the wrong side of that? I mean, I think it's not impossible for that to happen as a coincidence that you just keep ending up on the wrong side of the flipped coin. And it's not that they've had no good quarterback seasons at all, good enough to get them
Nothing
somewhere,
sustained.
but nothing sustained.
No,
I mean,
no
Coller,
quarterback's been their starter for 8 to 10 years.
Right.
In my lifetime.
But how many franchises have even two of those? Buffalo now has two through the entire time that they were a franchise. Just for example, how many does Detroit have?
Yeah, and their misery has been well documented, and beyond the quarterback position.
So I think that there's a handful of teams that have not had that guy for a long period of time. It's just those teams usually land on a Randall Cunningham.
Well, I was just going to say the Vikings for years, and before McCarthy, what was it? Dante Culpepper was their last pick that high.
Yep.
But they've done enough in free agency over the years to patch a few seasons together and have you believe. You figured the Bears would sign somebody who could do something. Cutler might have been that guy. I mean, Rex Grossman got them to the Super Bowl in spite of himself. So I just think it's bad management.
It is. Yeah, I mean, it's bad management that it happened. But
multiple management regimes.
Yeah, right. That you would think that one would just accidentally do this. I mean, think about the Ravens. This is what I mean about it being a coincidence. The Ravens, you could say, my gosh, those Ravens are geniuses. They drafted Flacco. He wasn't the highest draft pick. Was he like 18th overall or something? Whoa, that was such a smart pick. And then 32nd for Lamar Jackson. You guys have the big football brain. Jackson wasn't even their first pick in the first round of that draft. They picked Hayden Hurst before Lamar Jackson. That's what I mean about it being a coincidence. The Ravens get a franchise veteran quarterback who's going to be there forever and has now multiple MVPs, and he wasn't even their first choice as an organization. That's crazy.
And how does this let the Bears off the hook?
Because it's all random. Who gets the great quarterbacks is random. Patrick Mahomes wasn't the first quarterback taken in the draft. It's random.
I can't argue with that.
Yeah.
You're wrong, but I just can't argue with
Okay, there you go. Well, it's also been an hour and 52 minutes, so I've worn you down anyway.
Fumes a little here.
You probably say I was right about just about anything right now. Okay.
It's like waterboarding. Just make it end.
Yeah, two more comments. Terry's prediction is that Speedy Naylor, I can't call him Speedy. He's got to catch a couple touchdowns before I'll give him Speedy. Jalen Naylor scores the first Vikings touchdown of the season.
Sure. Is that bold?
No, anybody could do it.
I think maybe Dallas Turner scoop and score. Now that would be bold.
You have no idea who.
He's not going to get more than 5 sacks. We know that, but at least he.
I mean, we're out here at the gambling epicenter of the universe. I would not suggest trying to gamble on who scores first touchdowns of games because that doesn't seem like a very.
That is random. It could be a kickoff. It could be a fumble. It's probably going to be somebody you don't.
Well, I'd love to see it be a kickoff.
It's probably somebody that's going to score that won't score the rest of the year.
Comet comes in 2 hours later and announces that the reason that it's 6.5 is the over-under is because of Sam Darnold. I like that people are coming and going. That was brought up ever so slightly during the show, and that's a good maybe place to end. But let me mention again before we wrap up that we'll be doing tomorrow. And you know what you're going to do tomorrow? You're going to pick the whole schedule. We're also going to talk to the guy who owns this entire place, Derek Stevens. He came on with us in December. Awesome guy. He's from Detroit.
Great host.
We're going to talk NFC North with him. Also talk a little bit more about this. The Circa Million and Circa Survivor contests are super cool. So if you have any reason to go to Las Vegas or you're headed here anyway, come visit Circa. It is my favorite place. That's really why I do this, is because I like coming out here. They have to drag me kicking and screaming out to Vegas, but it is such an amazing sports book. Great places to eat in here, but also these contests are epic. So check them out, circalasvegas.com. We're going to be back tomorrow doing the live stream again, and you're going to pick every single game of the schedule.
Of the NFL schedule or the Vikings?
Every single game of the NFL schedule.
600 games?
Yep. It's a very long
in a
streak.
yeah. Well, that'll fill the 2 hours.
And you have to name each team's coaching staff, including special teams. Okay, that's enough. The Vikings control. All right, we'll see you guys tomorrow. But there will be other interviews and stuff that we do throughout the next couple days with other people here. So keep an eye out on the channel, including Colton Pouncey from the Athletic
in Detroit.
So we'll catch y'all later.
Thanks all for joining us.
Football. Really appreciate it, everybody.